Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Oliver. People always say family comes first, that you're supposed to forgive and move on, no matter what they do to you. But what happens when the people who are supposed to have your back are the ones stabbing you in it? What happens when your family cares more about looking good in front of other people than they care about you? When I found out my brother slept with my fiancée, my family forgave them and tried to reunite us. I made a decision that day, and I've never regretted it for a single moment. Regina and I had known each other for 3 years before she became my fiancée. We'd met in college, and from the first conversation, I knew she was special. She was brilliant, funny, ambitious, everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. When I proposed to her after 2 years of dating, she cried and said yes before I could even finish asking. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how everything had finally fallen into place. But there had always been a nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I kept pushing down, trying not to be paranoid or insecure. My brother seemed to always find reasons to be around Regina when I wasn't home. He would be dropping by our apartment unannounced to borrow tools or just say hi. And I'd let it go because I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous, controlling fiancé who couldn't handle his partner having a friendship with his own brother. The final family event before the wedding was supposed to be a celebration, a big barbecue at my parents' house with all the aunts, uncles, and cousins. Everyone was excited, talking about the upcoming ceremony, asking about honeymoon plans, and making toast to our future. I was manning the grill with my dad when my cousin, Steve, pulled me aside, and from his body language, I knew immediately that something was wrong. Steve explained to me what happened. He'd gone inside the house to use the upstairs bathroom because someone was already in the main one downstairs. While he was walking down the hallway past the guest bedroom, he heard low, intimate sounds. At first, Steve didn't think much of it, but then he heard Regina laugh. Wondering who she was with in such a private corner and knowing I was downstairs, he decided to investigate. Steve pushed the door open just a crack to see what was going on, and that's when he saw my brother and my fiancée, Regina, were standing in the corner of the room. My brother had his hand resting on Regina's waist, and her fingers were pressed against his chest. They weren't kissing or anything like that, but Steve said you could just feel that something was going on from the way their bodies were positioned. Steve told me that as soon as they realized he'd seen them, they both started talking at once, tripping over their words as they tried to explain. Regina said it wasn't what it looked like, that they were just having a conversation. My brother jumped in and said Steve had walked in at a weird moment and totally misunderstood what he was seeing. They kept insisting that nothing was happening, that Steve had gotten the wrong idea, that it was all completely innocent. But Steve wasn't buying it, and honestly, neither was I when he told me. You don't stand that close to someone, touching them like that, unless something is going on. Steve said he told them straight up that he was going to tell me what he saw, because I had a right to know what was happening behind my back. That's when Regina really started to panic. She grabbed Steve's arm and practically begged him not to say anything. She kept saying it would ruin everything, that nothing was going on, that telling me would cause problems for no reason. My brother tried a different approach. He pulled the whole "we're family" card and told Steve not to make a big deal out of nothing. But here's the thing about Steve. He's always been solid. We didn't just grow up in the same family. We grew up together, side by side. I have always been closer to him than my actual brother, because he had my back no matter what, even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to stay quiet and mind his own business. So when he pulled me aside at that barbecue and looked me straight in the eye to tell me what he'd seen, I knew he wasn't making it up or exaggerating. I could see it on his face how much it was killing him to be the one to tell me this. He didn't want to hurt me, but he knew I needed to know. And when he finished telling me the whole story, I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. Because deep down, I'd always suspected something was off between my brother and Regina. I'd noticed little things here and there that didn't sit right with me, but I'd always pushed those thoughts away. Now Steve was confirming that my gut feeling had been right all along. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. It was real. I thanked Steve, asked him to keep it between us for now, and went to find my parents. I pulled them aside, along with my brother and Regina, into my dad's study. I closed the door and told them what Steve had seen. I observed their faces as I spoke, looking for guilt, for remorse, for anything that would tell me this was all a terrible misunderstanding. My brother immediately went on the defensive. "Oh, come on, Oliver. Are you seriously going to believe that? We were just talking." Steve walked in at a weird moment and got the wrong idea. Regina's eyes filled with tears, swearing that there is nothing between her and my brother. But before she could finish, I turned to my parents, expecting them to be as shocked and angry as I was, expecting them to demand answers, to defend me, to tell my brother and Regina that this was unacceptable. Instead, my mother's face tightened with annoyance. "Oliver," she said slowly, "are you sure about what Steve saw? You know how these things can be misinterpreted. Maybe he saw them talking and assumed he saw them standing inappropriately close." I interrupted. My father sighed heavily. But did he actually see them kissing? Did he see anything concrete? And there it was. The gaslighting had begun. They weren't asking these questions because they wanted the truth. They were asking because they wanted an out, a way to dismiss what had happened and move on without dealing with the mess. "Where's the evidence, son?" my father continued. "You can't accuse people of something this serious based on one person's interpretation of a moment." I felt like I was losing my mind. "Dad, Steve wouldn't lie about this. And it's not just this one moment." I stopped myself, realizing I was about to reveal all the suspicions I'd been harboring, all the little things I'd noticed. But I pushed forward anyway, telling them how my brother has been flirting with Regina for months. The way he looks at her, the way he always finds excuses to be around her. My mother held up her hands and said, "Everyone, please. Let's all calm down. Oliver, sweetheart, I understand you're upset. But the wedding is in 3 weeks. We have 200 guests coming. We've paid for the venue, the caterer, the flowers. Everything is arranged. Don't you think you might be overreacting just a little bit? Pre-wedding jitters can make us see things that aren't really there." I stared at her in disbelief. Pre-wedding jitters? "Mom, my cousin caught my brother and my fiancée in a compromising position." "A position that could be explained innocently," she countered. "Look, even if there was some inappropriate behavior, which I'm not saying there was, don't you think the best thing to do is forgive and move forward? He is your younger brother. Regina is about to be your wife. Family is forever, Oliver. You can't throw that away over a misunderstanding." And there it was, laid bare. My family cared more about their reputation, about avoiding the embarrassment of a canceled wedding, about maintaining the appearance of a perfect family, than they cared about my pain. They cared more about the money they'd spent and what the guests would think than about the fact that I'd been betrayed by the two people who should have been most loyal to me. I looked at my brother and Regina. They were both observing me, and I could see the calculation in their eyes. They were waiting to see if the family pressure would work, if I would fold and let this go. My brother said he was sorry if he did anything that made you uncomfortable, but his voice was flat, perfunctory. He said it wasn't his intention. My fiancée, Regina, added that she was sorry as well, reaching for my hand. But I pulled away. She claimed that whatever Steve thought he saw, it wasn't what it looked like. They weren't really apologizing. They were saying the words they felt they needed to say to make this go away. There was no real remorse, no acknowledgement of what they'd actually done. Just hollow words designed to smooth things over, so everyone could move on and pretend nothing had happened. I looked around the room at my family, my parents, my brother, my fiancé, and I realized that I was utterly alone. No one in this room was on my side. No one was going to fight for me, validate my feelings, or demand the truth. They just wanted me to be quiet and compliant and make this easy for everyone else. Standing there in that study, looking at all of them, waiting for my response, I made a decision. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would pretend everything was fine. "Okay," I said quietly. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. The relief that washed over the room was instant. My mother actually smiled, like I just told her I got a promotion or something. "That's my boy. I knew you'd be reasonable about this." Regina's face lit up with hope, and she asked if the wedding was still on. I told her yes, and she threw her arms around me. I just stood there, not hugging her back. But nobody noticed. They were all too busy being relieved that the drama was over, and they could go back to pretending we were a perfect family. For the next 3 weeks, I played the happy groom. I smiled at the rehearsal dinner. I held Regina's hand during family dinners and talked about seating charts and what song we danced to. Everyone kept telling me how mature I was being, how proud they were that I didn't let a silly misunderstanding ruin such an important day. But while I was playing this role in front of them, I was quietly taking apart my entire life. I began buying crypto with my savings. I gathered all my important papers, my birth certificate, my passport, my social security card, and put them in a folder for easy access. I went through the apartment, Regina, and I shared, and I took anything that really mattered to me. I spent hours online looking at flights. I needed one that left early in the morning on the wedding day. I found a flight to Vancouver that left at 6 in the morning. I'd always wanted to visit Canada, and it seemed like as good a place as any to start over. I bought a one-way ticket. Then I started applying for jobs up there, reaching out to people I knew in my field who might have connections. I even found a small apartment I could rent month to month while I figured things out. The whole time, Regina kept talking about our honeymoon plans, where we'd live in 5 years, and what we'd name our kids. I'd just nod and smile. My mother would go on and on about how beautiful the wedding was going to be, how everyone was so excited, how it was going to be the event of the year. I'd agree with her. I felt like a ghost. I was there physically, going through all the motions, but the real me had already checked out. The real me was already gone. The hardest part was the dress rehearsal 2 days before the wedding. I had to stand at that altar and watch Regina walk down the aisle in her rehearsal dress. The officiant was talking about love and commitment and spending forever together, and I had to stand there and pretend like my heart wasn't completely dead inside my chest. It took everything I had not to break down right there, but I held it together. I said my practice vows as if I were reading from a script. I kissed her when the officiant told me to. Afterward, at dinner, I even gave a toast about how lucky I was and how excited I was to start our life together. People clapped. That night, my father pulled me aside. He put his hand on my shoulder and told me he was proud of me for being the bigger person. "That's what being a man is about, son," he said. "Knowing when to let things go for the good of the family." I just nodded at him. I didn't trust myself to speak because I knew if I opened my mouth, I'd say something I couldn't take back. The thing is, this wasn't the first time my family had acted like my feelings didn't matter when it came to my brother. Growing up, my brother was always the golden child. He was charming and good at sports and popular at school. When we were kids, he broke my science project the night before the science fair. I'd spent weeks on it, and he knocked it off the table while he was messing around. My parents said it was an accident and that I needed to be more understanding. When I was 16, he withdrew money from my savings account without asking. I'd saved $200 for my summer job. My parents said brothers share things, and I was being selfish for making a big deal out of it. When he lied and got me grounded for something I didn't do, they believed him over me. Every single time, there was an excuse. Every single time, I was the one who had to bend, forgive, and move on for the sake of keeping the peace. I'd spent my entire life being the reasonable one, the mature one, the one who put the family's wants above what I needed. But I was done with that. I was completely done. The wedding day came, and I was at the airport sitting at my gate, waiting for my flight to board. The weather was perfect. Sunny, warm, with just a little breeze. I was told the venue looked incredible, like something you'd see in a magazine. Guests started showing up around 2 in the afternoon. The ceremony was supposed to start at 4. My parents got there early, and my brother was in his tuxedo, ready to stand next to me as my best man. Regina was in the bridal suite with her bridesmaids, probably with her hair and makeup done, probably so excited she could barely sit still. My phone started ringing around 3 o'clock. It was my mother first. I watched her name light up the screen and let it go to voicemail. Then my father called. Then my brother. Then Regina. I didn't answer any of them. I just sat there in the airport terminal, watching each call come through and then fade away. After the calls stopped getting through, the text messages started flooding in. My mother wrote, "Where are you?" My father sent, "The ceremony starts in an hour." My brother texted, "Oliver, this isn't funny." Regina's message said, "Please call us back." Then my mother again said, "We're worried sick." I read each one as it came in, then turned my phone on silent and kept it inside my bag. I looked out through the massive windows at the planes taking off, one after another, climbing into the sky and disappearing into the distance. And I felt calm. There was no voice in my head telling me I was making a mistake, no guilt twisting in my stomach, no doubt creeping in to make me second-guess myself. Just this solid, unshakable feeling that I was finally doing the right thing for me. They called for boarding at 3:30. I stood up, grabbed my carry-on bag, and joined everyone else in line. I handed my boarding pass to the gate agent, walked down that narrow hallway that connects to the plane, and found my seat by the window. As we moved, I let myself imagine what was happening back at the wedding venue. Right about now, the panic would be setting in. My parents would call me over and over, growing more frantic with each unanswered call. As we took off, I looked out the window and watched the city shrink below me. The buildings got smaller and smaller until they looked like toys. The streets turned into thin lines. Everything I'd known my whole life was down there, getting further away with every second. And somewhere in all of that, my family was dealing with the disaster they'd created. My parents were probably trying to hold themselves together in front of all those guests, come up with explanations, and save face. Regina was probably crying her eyes out. For the first time in my entire life, their mess wasn't mine to clean up. Their embarrassment wasn't mine to prevent. Their feelings weren't more important than my own. I wasn't there to smooth things over, be the reasonable one, or sacrifice myself to keep the family looking good. And that felt like freedom. When we landed in Vancouver, I turned my phone back on. The screen exploded with notifications. Dozens of missed calls. Countless text messages. Voicemails were filling up my inbox. I ignored it all and opened a new text message to my parents. I just typed one sentence. You wanted them together so badly. Marry them to each other instead. I hit send and watched the message go through. Then I went into my contacts and blocked my mother's number, blocked my father's number, blocked my brother, blocked Regina. I scrolled through and blocked my aunts and uncles, who I knew would try to guilt me into coming back. I kept my cousin's number active because he was the only one who'd actually been on my side. I kept a few friends whom I trusted, people who knew me well enough to understand why I'd done this. Everyone else got cut off. I needed a clean break. And I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their dysfunction through guilt trips and manipulation. I didn't find out what happened at the venue until later. My cousin told me everything when we talked a few days later. He said it was absolute chaos. Once it became clear that I wasn't just running late, that I actually wasn't coming at all, people didn't know what to do. Some guests left right away, probably feeling awkward about the whole situation. Regina completely fell apart. And eventually her parents had to take her home because she couldn't stop. My brother tried to control the narrative, walking around telling people that he had no idea what was going on, that I'd seemed fine the day before, that this was entirely out of nowhere. He played the confused, concerned brother, as if he were just as much a victim as everyone else. My parents had to stand at the front of that decorated venue and tell dressed-up guests that there wouldn't be a wedding. My cousin said my mother looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, and my father's face was red with anger and humiliation. The story spread through our entire social circle within days. Everyone was talking about it. My parents didn't give up easily. They tried to reach me through every possible channel they could think of. My aunt called and left messages saying I needed to come home and work this out. My uncle sent emails talking about forgiveness and family. Mutual friends would contact me, saying my parents just wanted to talk, that they were sorry, that I should at least hear them out. I didn't respond to any of it. I'd made my decision, and I knew that if I gave them even an inch, they'd try to pull me all the way back into their world of guilt and obligation, putting everyone else's comfort above my own well-being. So I held firm. I focused on building my new life in Vancouver. I threw myself into my online job. I also started seeing a therapist, which was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. I worked through everything that had happened with Regina and my brother, but I also worked through my entire childhood, all those years of being the one who had to bend and compromise and make myself smaller so my brother could shine. I learned what healthy relationships actually look like, whether that's romantic relationships or friendships or family. I realized that real love doesn't ask you to ignore your own pain. Absolute respect doesn't require you to pretend everything is fine when it's not. And a real family doesn't choose reputation over your well-being. 5 years went by. I built a life I was actually proud of. I had a career I loved, friends who felt more like family than my real family ever had. And eventually, I met someone who showed me what it meant to be with someone who actually chose me, who valued me, who didn't make me feel like I had to earn basic respect. We'd been together for a while, and I'd never once doubted her or questioned whether she was being honest with me. That's what a real relationship feels like. Then one day, I got an email from my aunt, my mother's sister. The subject line said, "About your father." I almost deleted it without reading it, but something made me click on it. The message was short. My father had a significant heart attack. He was stable, but not doing great. The family wanted me to come home, to visit, to make things right before it was too late. My mother was asking for me every day. They included the hospital address and visiting hours. I thought about my father that day in the study. The way they'd made me question what I knew was true. The way they dismissed my pain like it didn't matter. The way they cared more about their reputation and avoiding embarrassment than about me. And I thought about all the years before that, all the times I'd been expected to make myself smaller, to make room for my brother, to be the bigger person, to give up what I needed so the family could avoid conflict. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, and that's okay. I sent flowers to the hospital with a card that said, "Wishing you a full recovery. Take care." I didn't put a return address on it. I didn't call. I didn't visit. A few days later, my aunt emailed again. She said my father was asking for me, that he wanted to apologize, that the family needed me. I didn't respond. I chose myself. And I'd make the same choice again without hesitation.